NASCAR Cup Series heads to Homestead-Miami Speedway this weekend for the second race of the round of 8. As the Cup Series makes their way to this racetrack, the points battle in the playoffs becomes ever more tight, with second through fifth really close. So as we're joined by Parker Kligerman and Dustin Long, let's kind of preview what we're going to see this weekend, specifically from the playoff drivers. Like I mentioned, that points battle so close. You look at William Byron in second place. He's only 9 points to the good. Something like that can be wiped away in a single stage. So what are these playoff drivers thinking headed to Homestead-Miami Speedway? Parker?
Well, I think it's a bit of risk versus reward, right? Because there is a huge opportunity here to run the higher lanes, as we will talk about throughout this entire weekend and all the series of racing there. But the thing that really for them that has to be on their mind is when do you use that wall, and when do you have to use it, or can you make your car make speed without going up beside the wall? Because it does have a risk in that you hit that wall, you bend a toe link, your day is gone way downhill. And so I think for these playoff drivers, they have to race a little smarter. You can't, though. It doesn't mean like you can run around there at 90%. Like that's just not possible. You're going to get overtaken. You've got to just find a way to be at your 99.9% or 100% without ever going to 101%, right? Like that's what it's going to take for these drivers to go up there and get the points that they need and to race around other drivers who don't have that, risk, or they're willing to take the risk because they don't have anything to lose, right? You look at we'll go into some, I guess, drivers that are out there, but you look at those drivers that can be racing who don't have that risk or can take the risk. And that sort of puts you in a bind of having to make decisions they're not having to make. So it's going to be a very intense race for these drivers with how close the points are, knowing you have those stage points twice in the race. I think, there's going to be a lot of decisions being made corner by corner, lap by lap, in evaluating where you are, what you need to get done, and then what you're willing to do or risk to get it.
And I think Parker's right. I think the decisions are going to be a key thing, but I think the decisions started earlier in the week. How are you setting up your car? Are you going for a short run car, or are you going for a long run car? I can think back to last year's race. Ryan Blaney's car was more of a short run car. And in the last stage, I know he started on the bottom lane, made up some positions, and got himself in a really good position. Now, again, he didn't have the pace of Kyle Larson, but he was putting himself in a good spot. That's what you have to do at this place, especially with, as you said, Kim, the points are so close and so tight that, one little mistake can really hurt you. And as Blaney saw last year when he spun on the pit access road later in that third stage. So I think it's the decisions of, do I want a long run car or do I want a short run car? Obviously, if I'm a driver, I want to be the best in both areas, but I'm not necessarily can always be. And I think another key thing to the weekend is once you get to the track is qualifying and putting yourself in position to get a strong qualifying spot so you have the opportunity to score stage points in that first stage. With these points being as tight as it can be, 3, 4, 5 points can be the difference. So if you qualify 15th or 18th or 20th, now it just makes your road a little bit harder. Admittedly, at Homestead, there's all these different lanes that you can make some moves and get up there, but still, it just makes you work that much harder. And if you have to run the outside lane a little bit sooner or a little bit more often, as Parker alluded to, then if you hit the wall, now if you've done some damage to the car, you've ruined your day because you didn't qualify well. So I think a lot of this is taking place, this week at the shop, and the decisions that are made, and then in setting up for qualifying before you even get the green flag to wave to start things on Sunday.
If we look at this race last year, Kyle Larson took stage 1, stage 2 before winning the race. At the time, he was a non-playoff driver during that point in the season. And then you look at the top 10 from last year, only 2 drivers were actually playoff drivers in the top 10. So can we make the case this year that we're going to see a lot of non-playoff drivers in the top 10 at Homestead-Miami Speedway and maybe even steal that win? And if so, who are we looking at?
I think you can, because it goes back to what I was saying before. It's the risk versus reward, and those drivers are able to take more risk to try and run up front, to use the wall, to have that leeway to make a mistake and then suddenly find themselves, maybe out of the race, but who cares, right? At that point, they don't have the same level of something on the line like some of these playoff drivers are trying to make it to the championship for. So I think it opens up that opportunity. I also think the nature of the racetrack does, right? This is a high tire wear racetrack that a driver can abuse that tires. in a way that they can suddenly have a huge fall off in performance or speed. And so I think that lends itself to having a more mixed up field at times. Drivers that also find themselves just maybe adapting to this track better. Maybe they're able to use the bottom early on a run better than some others, and then know when to transfer to the top lanes. And that sort of almost understanding and feel that some drivers just have for this place. So if I wanted to point one out to me that I thought was, up at the front last week in contention for the win, there was Ross Chastain. I think he's one that sticks out to me as a driver that could be a spoiler to the playoff drivers, and to someone that would go out there and win this race and not allow a playoff driver to go win.
That's a good name, and it's somebody I kind of wondered about because, look, we've seen the speed out of Chastain and Trackhouse early in the year, but the latter part of the season, it hasn't always been there. So, I'm kind of interested to see if they can build upon what they did at Vegas. Obviously, mile-and-a-half track, I think of the Toyotas. I think of somebody like a Ty Gibbs, a Bubba Wallace, for as strong as the Toyotas can be. And those are some of the other cars that I think. But I think there is the opportunity for these non-playoff drivers to get a top 10, just because there's going to be so much pressure on these playoff drivers. And look, these playoff drivers have not been smooth, have not been consistent for the most part throughout the playoffs. There's been mistakes here and there. You're pushing to the limit. You're pushing beyond the limit. And that's going to lead to some issues, and that opens the door for some non-playoff drivers. So if there's only 3, 4, 5 playoff drivers in the top 10 on Sunday, it wouldn't surprise me, because where the stakes are getting raised so much that we're going to see probably more mistakes being made by the playoff drivers.
All the drama unfolds this weekend. Don't forget to join us this Sunday, October 22nd, 2 p.m. Eastern on NBC.
Hi, I'm Parker Kligerman. For more access like this from Pit Road, be sure to click and subscribe to the Motorsports on NBC YouTube channel.